It was a cool autumn evening when I arrived in Hollow Creek, a town that, like many small towns, wasn't marked on many maps, the sort of place where people passed through only if they had no other choice. But for me, it wasn't about passing through. I had just inherited an old house from an aunt I never knew existed, and with it, a legacy I didn't know I wanted. The house sat on the edge of town, far from the bustle of Main Street. Its windows were dark, the paint chipped and peeling, and the iron gate that led up to the front door squeaked with every gust of wind. It looked as though it hadn't been lived in for decades, which, as it turned out, was exactly the case. I had no idea what to expect when I stepped inside. It wasn't large by any means, just a two-story, creaky structure that seemed to sag under its own weight. The floors groaned as I moved, the air thick with dust and the scent of something long forgotten. The furniture was covered in white sheets, giving the place an eerie, abandoned feeling. But there was a strange charm to it, a reminder of a time before, a time I would never know. I had no immediate plans to stay for long, just to clean it up, sort through whatever belongings my aunt had left, and maybe sell it. Hollow Creek wasn't a place I'd ever thought I'd spend much time, let alone call home. But as the evening settled in and the sun dipped below the horizon, a strange feeling settled in the pit of my stomach. It wasn't the house itself that unnerved me, it was the quiet, the oppressive silence that surrounded everything. There was something about it that seemed off. As I explored the house, I found the kitchen, a small dining room, and a staircase that creaked ominously as I ascended to the second floor. The walls were lined with faded wallpaper, yellowing from age, and in every corner of the house there were mirrors. Some were cracked, others covered in dust, but they all had the same unsettling quality, like they were watching me. I was about to head back downstairs when I noticed something peculiar, a small door at the end of the hall. It was tucked away in a corner, almost hidden by shadows. The door was old, with iron hinges that had rusted over time. It looked like it hadn't been opened in years. My curiosity got the better of me, and I reached for the handle. It was locked. I should have turned away, left it alone, but something about that door kept pulling me back. I had to know what was behind it. I explored the house for a bit longer, but the feeling of being watched grew stronger with every step I took. It was as though the house itself was alive, breathing in the silence with me. Every floorboard creaked a little too loudly. Every shadow seemed to stretch just a little too far. And then, just as I was about to call it a night and retire to the bedroom, I heard it, a whisper. It was faint at first, a soft murmur that sounded like it came from the walls themselves. I paused, holding my breath, listening. The whisper grew louder, and though I couldn't understand the words, I could hear the urgency in the voice. It was as if someone or something was trying to tell me something. I turned slowly, but there was no one there. The house was as silent as ever, but that whisper, it didn't stop. It seemed to echo through the walls, rising in pitch and intensity, like 100 voices speaking in unison, their words twisted and intelligible. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up, and my heart raced as I looked around, unsure of what was real and what was not. Suddenly, the whisper stopped. Dead silence. Then, I felt it. A cold breeze brushing against the back of my neck, followed by the unmistakable sound of a door creaking open. The door, the one at the end of the hall. My instinct screamed at me to run, to leave the house, but I couldn't move. It was as if something was holding me in place, forcing me to stay. Against my better judgment, I walked toward the door. As I reached for the handle, it turned on its own, slowly and deliberately. The moment the door opened, I felt the temperature drop even further. The room beyond was
pitch black, a void that seemed to swallow all light. And then, from the darkness, a pair of eyes gleamed.
I could feel my pulse pounding in my ears as I stood frozen, staring into the impenetrable darkness that filled the room. The cold air wrapped around me, making my breath visible in front of my face. It wasn't just cold. It was a suffocating, unnatural chill that seemed to seep into my very bones. My instincts screamed at me to turn and run, but something, curiosity, fear, or something else entirely, kept me rooted in place. The faint glowing orbs I had seen in the darkness didn't blink. They didn't move, but they stared at me, unwavering, as if they were waiting, watching, calculating. I couldn't make out the shape of whatever was behind them, but the air in the room felt wrong. There was something alive in there, something ancient and malevolent. I stepped back, my mind racing, but my feet felt like they were stuck in thick mud. The whispers that had once echoed from the walls were now silent, replaced by a deeper, heavier sound, breathing, slow, labored, as though the very walls themselves were inhaling and exhaling in time with the movement of the unseen presence. My breath caught in my throat as I strained my eyes, trying to make sense of what I was seeing, or rather what I wasn't seeing. The shadows twisted and danced before my eyes, never staying still long enough to reveal any clarity. Then it happened. One of the glowing orbs shifted. It was subtle at first, a slight movement, as though whatever it was had taken a step. The orb seemed to drift, its light dimming slightly before flickering back to its eerie glow. My heart skipped a beat. The feeling that had been gnawing at me grew into something more profound, something that wrapped around my chest and squeezed the air from my lungs. I reached for the door, ready to slam it shut and run, but before I could even touch the handle, a voice broke through the silence. "Stay." It wasn't the soft murmur of whispers I had heard before. It was clear, commanding, direct. The voice sounded as though it came from everywhere at once, from the walls, the air, the ground beneath my feet. It was a voice I couldn't place, yet it felt too familiar, like a memory I couldn't recall, like a name I had forgotten. I stood frozen, the words resonating in my mind. Stay. I had no choice but to follow. The fear that gripped me now was no longer a physical threat, but something far more insidious. It was the fear of being compelled, the fear that this house had some power over me, something I couldn't fight, no matter how much I wanted to. The air in the room seemed to thicken, pressing against my chest, suffocating me. I turned around, desperate to leave, but the room had shifted. The door that had been wide open just moments ago was now barely ajar. It wasn't the same door. This one had changed. The wood was darker now, its grain almost alive, twisting and pulsing, as though it were made of something organic, breathing, moving. I could hear faint scratching sounds from beyond the door, like claws scraping against wood, dragging slowly, deliberately. Then came a sound I couldn't ignore, a low, guttural growl, deep and throaty, reverberating through the floor beneath me. It was close, too close. It echoed through the very core of my being. I wanted to run. I needed to run. But again, my legs refused to move. My body was frozen, caught in the grip of something unseen. The eyes were still there, now more intense. They had multiplied. What I had first thought were 2 glowing orbs had now expanded into a dozen, no, 100 pairs of eyes, all staring at me from the dark. They blinked in unison, their gaze unblinking, tracking my every move. I felt it again, the pull. Something in the room was calling to me, like an invisible force tugging at the edges of my mind. My gaze shifted from the door back to the glowing eyes. I could hear the whispers again, louder this time, more urgent. They weren't just speaking anymore, they were chanting, their words blending into one long, continuous sound. "You must join us." The words wrapped around my thoughts, smothering my resistance. I took a slow, tentative step forward, my body acting against my will, drawn by some invisible tether. The growl that had resonated earlier now seemed to grow louder, rising from the floorboards, reverberating through the walls. The shadows seemed to shift in response to the sound, stretching and warping in a sickening dance that made my stomach churn. I reached out to touch the walls, steadying myself as the room seemed to tilt, the floor beneath me uneven. The shadows seemed to blur, their shapes no longer confined to the corners of the room. They spread, growing longer, thicker, filling every inch of space. I could feel the weight of them pressing against my skin, cold and suffocating, their whispers growing louder with each passing second. "Join us," the voice urged again, and this time I felt a strange tug at the very core of my being, as though something was reaching into me, pulling at my soul. In that moment, I realized that the house wasn't just abandoned, it was alive, and it wanted me. I turned toward the door again, but this time it wasn't just the air that was cold. The door itself felt cold to the touch, unnaturally so. My hand trembled as I reached for the handle, the warmth of my skin meeting the icy metal. I yanked the door open. The sight that greeted me was enough to make my blood run cold. Beyond the door was a long corridor, stretching far beyond what the house should have allowed. It twisted and turned at impossible angles, as if the house itself were shifting, changing, bending to some unknown design. And then, standing at the far end of the hallway, just before the corner, I saw something. A figure. A tall, shadowy silhouette standing motionless. Its eyes glowed, the same eerie light I had seen earlier. But these eyes were different. They weren't just glowing, they were watching me, waiting for me to come closer. The whispers started again, and this time I knew that the voice wasn't coming from the walls anymore. It was coming from the figure. "Come closer," the voice urged, its tone now colder, darker, more insistent. I couldn't fight it anymore. The house had taken hold of me, and there was no escaping its pull. I took a step forward, and then another, and the whispers grew louder still.
Segment 3, The Invitation. I don't know why I took that step. It was as though something outside myself was controlling my movements, pulling me forward with an irresistible force. The air grew thicker with every step I took, my breath becoming shallow as the darkness wrapped around me like a suffocating blanket. The figure at the end of the hallway stood motionless, its glowing eyes never leaving mine. I could feel my heart hammering in my chest, the rhythmic pulse of fear pounding in my ears. Every instinct I had screamed at me to turn around, to run, to leave this place and never look back. But I couldn't. The closer I got, the more the house seemed to close in around me. The walls felt as though they were breathing, the floor beneath my feet groaning and creaking with each step I took. The whispers, now louder and more distinct, rose into a maddening cacophony in my head. "Come closer." The voice was clearer now, almost soothing, as though it were trying to lull me into a trance. I resisted, but my body betrayed me. The pull, the tug on my soul was too strong. It was as if the house was feeding off my fear, drawing me deeper into its dark embrace. I reached the end of the hallway and stopped just before the figure, its outline more defined now. It was tall, unnaturally tall, its limbs long and angular. Its face was hidden in shadow, but I could feel its gaze, cold and piercing, as if it could see straight through me. The air around it was colder, the kind of cold that gnawed at your bones, leaving you with a sense of dread that settled deep in your gut. I didn't want to look at it, but I couldn't tear my eyes away. I was trapped in its gaze, paralyzed by the overwhelming presence that emanated from it. The whispers swirled around me, pressing in from all sides, as though the walls themselves were alive with voices. They all spoke at once, their words incomprehensible, blending together into a single terrifying sound. And then, in the stillness, the figure moved.
It was a sudden, jarring movement, fast and unnatural, its head snapping to one side, its eyes never leaving me. The shadows around it seemed to shift, bending and twisting, like something alive, reaching out for me. I felt a coldness settle into my very core, and for a moment I thought I would freeze right there, trapped in that hallway forever. But then the figure spoke, its voice low and guttural, like the creaking of ancient wood. "You have come." The words hit me like a physical blow, and I staggered back, the weight of them pressing down on me. The house was alive, I realized. Not just the walls or the shadows, but the very essence of the place was alive, feeding on the fear, the confusion, the helplessness that it had planted within me. It had been waiting for someone to answer its call, and now that someone was me. "Come closer," the figure repeated, its voice like a song, a lullaby, but one laced with venom. "You belong here now." I wanted to scream, to shout, to tear myself away from this nightmare, but my throat closed up. The words died before they could leave my mouth. I felt something stirring inside me, something dark, something that didn't belong. The air around me thickened, and I could feel the temperature drop even further. The figure stepped forward, its movements fluid and unnervingly graceful. Its face, still hidden in shadow, loomed closer. The shadows around it writhed, pulling at the edges of the room like tendrils of smoke. "We have been waiting for you," it whispered, "for so long." I couldn't understand what it meant. Was this some kind of trap, some kind of madness I was slipping into? But as the figure took another step, I realized something more terrifying. It wasn't just waiting for me, it was inviting me. It wanted me to stay, to become part of whatever dark force had claimed this house as its own. In that moment, I felt a cold hand brush against my mind, like a whisper in the back of my thoughts. It wasn't the voice of the figure anymore, it was the house itself. The walls, the floor, the ceiling, the very air around me, everything was speaking. The house was speaking to me. "You are mine now," the voice said, smooth and suffocating. "You are part of us." The chill intensified, and I could feel the house's presence press into me, crawling beneath my skin, filling my chest. I gasped for air, but it was as though the room itself was closing in, crushing the breath from my lungs. My hands shook, my legs weak with fear, but still I couldn't move. I was paralyzed, trapped in the grip of something ancient and hungry. "Welcome home," the figure said, its voice now rich with satisfaction. "Welcome to your new life." And with that, everything went dark.
Segment 4. The darkness awaits. I don't know how long I stood there, enveloped in darkness, my mind spinning, my body frozen. The cold had become unbearable, seeping into my very soul, paralyzing me with its relentless grip. I tried to move, to scream, but my body refused to obey. I was trapped in the darkness, trapped in the house, trapped in something much older and far more powerful than I could comprehend. The whispers had stopped. The voice of the figure that had haunted the hallway, inviting me closer, was gone. The only sound left was the deafening silence that filled the room. But it wasn't an empty silence. It was thick, oppressive, filled with the weight of 1,000 years of secrets. And then, slowly, agonizingly slowly, my vision began to return. The shadows retreated, and the faintest glimmer of light cut through the darkness. At first, it was just a sliver, a thread of light barely enough to see. But as it grew, I realized I wasn't alone. The room around me was changing. The walls, once cracked and weathered, were now smooth, almost too perfect. The floor beneath my feet was no longer creaking with age, but polished, gleaming as if newly laid. The oppressive weight of the house had lifted,
but in its place was something far worse, an unnatural stillness, a stillness that felt wrong, like the calm before a storm. The shadows lingered in the corners of the room, twisting and swirling as though alive, eager to pounce. I blinked, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. Where was the figure? Where was the thing that had stood before me in the hallway? But then I saw it. At the far corner of the room, in the deepest shadow, a figure began to emerge. It was tall, impossibly tall, and the more I looked at it, the more its shape seemed to shift, its form warping and changing like a reflection in water. It was like a mirage, a thing that couldn't exist, but did anyway. And as it came closer, I realized with sickening certainty that it wasn't just one figure, it was a multitude. Hundreds of eyes blinked in the dark, their yellow, soulless gaze fixated on me. "You've come so far," a voice whispered from within the shadows. It wasn't the same voice from before, it was different. Multiple voices layered on top of each other, each one tinged with malice and hunger. "So much further than anyone else." I staggered back, my heart pounding in my chest as the figure, or whatever it was, continued to approach. It was no longer a single entity, but a collection of shifting forms, twisting and writhing like a swarm of insects. The air grew colder still, and I could feel my body trembling, not just from the cold, but from the overwhelming sense of wrongness that seemed to pulse in time with the beating of my heart. "What are you?" I managed to force the words out, my voice shaking with fear. The entity stopped, its shape flickering in and out of focus, like it was made of darkness itself. The eyes blinked again, and I could feel their gaze like a physical weight pressing down on me. And then the voice came again, this time softer, almost lulling. "We are the ones who have been waiting, the ones who have seen everything, the ones who have waited for someone like you." I wanted to run, I needed to run, but my legs wouldn't move. It was as if the air had thickened to the point where every step required an impossible effort. The house, the shadows, the eyes, they were all pulling me in, drawing me closer with each breath I took. "You're not the first," the voice continued, growing more insistent until it filled my mind completely. "We've seen them all. The ones who came before you, the ones who tried to leave, the ones who thought they could escape." I felt a cold laugh ripple through the room, a sound so low, so sinister, that it made my skin crawl. The eyes, now more numerous than ever, seemed to blink in unison, like a grotesque signal, as if they were waiting for something. And then the shifting figure stepped forward again, its presence overwhelming. "But you will be different," it cooed. "You will stay." The figure's form seemed to stretch and distort, the darkness bending and swirling around it. It was as though the walls themselves were pulsating, contracting and expanding with every word that was spoken. The air became thick with the scent of rot, as if the house itself had come alive, and I was standing at the very center of it, trapped in its grasp. I felt my body tremble harder now, not just from fear, but from something else, something inside me, something dark, something that was being awakened by the presence of whatever this thing was. The coldness seeped deeper, not just into my bones, but into my thoughts, clouding my mind. I could feel the weight of its gaze pressing against my skull, urging me to submit, to become part of it. "We will all be together soon," the voice whispered, its words a promise, a threat, and a lure all at once. "You will be one with us. You will be part of the house." I wanted to scream. I wanted to fight, to break free from whatever hold the house had over me. But the darkness, the eyes, the whispers, they were all around me, enveloping me, drowning me in their suffocating presence. And then, as the last shred of my resistance began to crumble, the figure stretched its hand out to me. It was long, its fingers reaching for me with an unsettling slowness, like the tendrils of a deep underwater creature. The coldness radiated from it, and I knew that if I allowed it to touch me, I would never be the same. I would never escape. "Join us," the voice urged again, growing louder, more insistent, until it filled my mind completely. Our time is now." I could feel my body moving towards it, my mind succumbing to the pull, until there was no more fight left in me. I was slipping, falling into the darkness, falling into the house's cold embrace. And then, as the last shred of my resistance began to crumble, the figure stretched its hand out to me. It was long, its fingers reaching for me with an unsettling slowness, like the tendrils of a deep underwater creature. The coldness radiated from it, and I knew that if I allowed it to touch me, I would never be the same. I would never escape. "Join us," the voice urged again, growing louder, more insistent, until it filled my mind completely. Our time is now." I could feel my body moving towards it, my mind succumbing to the pull, until there was no more fight left in me. I was slipping, falling into the darkness, falling into the house's cold embrace. And then, as the last shred of my resistance began to crumble, the figure stretched its hand out to me. It was long, its fingers reaching for me with an unsettling slowness, like the tendrils of a deep underwater creature. The coldness radiated from it, and I knew that if I allowed it to touch me, I would never be the same. I would never escape. And then, as the last shred of my resistance began to crumble, the figure stretched its hand out to me. It was long, its fingers reaching for me with an unsettling slowness, like the tendrils of a deep underwater creature. The coldness radiated from it, and I knew that if I allowed it to touch me, I would never be the same. I would never escape. And then, as the last shred of my resistance began to crumble, the figure stretched its hand out to me. It was long, its fingers reaching for me with an unsettling slowness, like the tendrils of a deep underwater creature. The coldness radiated from it, and I knew that if I allowed it to touch me, I would never be the same. I would never escape. And then, as the last shred of my resistance began to crumble, the figure stretched its hand out to me. It was long, its fingers reaching for me with an unsettling slowness, like the tendrils of a deep underwater creature. The coldness radiated from it, and I knew that if I allowed it to touch me, I would never be the same. I would never escape. And then, as the last shred of my resistance began to crumble, the figure stretched its hand out to me. It was long, its fingers reaching for me with an unsettling slowness, like the tendrils of a deep underwater creature. The coldness radiated from it, and I knew that if I allowed it to touch me, I would never be the same. I would never escape. And then, as the last shred of my resistance began to crumble, the figure stretched its hand out to me. It was long, its fingers reaching for me with an unsettling slowness, like the tendrils of a deep underwater creature. The coldness radiated from it, and I knew that if I allowed it to touch me, I would never be the same. I would never escape. And then,
when I regained consciousness, I was no longer in the hallway. The room I found myself in was unlike any I had seen in the house before. The walls were smooth, almost polished, yet covered with the same layer of dark, creeping shadows that seemed to pulse with a life of their own. I couldn't move at first. My body felt heavy, as though it was weighed down by invisible chains. I could barely breathe, the air thick and suffocating, pressing against my chest. I tried to sit up, but the moment I attempted to move, a sharp, jarring pain shot through my entire body.
I gasped, my vision blurring as I struggled to focus on my surroundings. The room was dimly lit, but the shadows in the corners seemed to stretch unnaturally, like fingers reaching out to touch me. Where am I? My voice came out ragged and weak, barely a whisper. My throat felt raw, like I hadn't spoken in days. I looked around, panic rising in my chest as I realized I wasn't alone. In the corner of the room, a figure stood, cloaked in darkness, its eyes glowing softly, a faint yellow hue that burned through the blackness. It was the same figure, the one from before. It had returned, and now it was watching me, waiting. Its presence was suffocating, its gaze like an iron vice around my chest. The air grew colder, if that was even possible, and the shadows in the room seemed to grow deeper, darker. "You've awoken," the figure's voice echoed, hollow and too far calm. "It's time." I couldn't respond. My mind was a whirlpool of confusion and fear. What was this place? What had happened to me? My body refused to cooperate. My limbs felt stiff, unresponsive, as if they no longer belonged to me. And then, slowly, painfully, I realized something. I couldn't feel myself anymore. There was a hollowness inside me, a vast emptiness, as though the very essence of my being had been taken, replaced by something alien. The horror of it swept over me like a wave, and I struggled against the weight pressing down on me, but my movements were sluggish, unnatural. My body felt like a puppet, strung together by invisible threads. I was awake, but I wasn't alive. "The house has claimed you," the figure said, stepping closer. "It feeds on your fear, your confusion. It binds you to its will." I wanted to scream, to run, but the words caught in my throat. I could barely form coherent thoughts, let alone make my body obey. The room around me seemed to pulse in rhythm with my heartbeat, each beat growing louder, more intense, as though the walls themselves were alive, breathing in time with me. "You'll be part of us," they whispered, their voices distorted, unrecognizable. "You'll never leave." A surge of panic shot through me. The words were too real, too powerful. They were seeping into my thoughts, drowning me in their urgency. And then, through the endless chaos of the whispers, one voice broke through, my own. It was faint at first, barely a thread of sound, but as I listened, I realized it was coming from me. The words were desperate, a reflection of my inner struggle, but they felt foreign. "Please, help me." But there was no help. There was no one to hear me. I was alone in this suffocating darkness, trapped in a house that had long since forgotten what it meant to be human. The figure stepped closer still, and I could feel its coldness seep into me as it laid a hand on my shoulder. "It's time for you to join them," it whispered. The last thing I felt before everything went black was a cold hand tightening around my wrist.
Segment 6. The Binding. The darkness took me again, suffocating, relentless. I lost all sense of time, all sense of self. For what felt like an eternity, I floated in a space that wasn't a space at all. There was no light, no sound, only a crushing emptiness. The cold I felt before now seemed like a distant memory. I couldn't feel my body. I couldn't feel anything. I was trapped in an abyss, held by invisible forces beyond my comprehension. But then I heard something, a whisper, faint at first, but gradually growing louder. It was a voice, low, distant, but unmistakable. "You are here with us now." The voice was familiar, the same voice I had heard in the shadows, the one that had haunted my every waking moment. My body jerked, but I couldn't move. I was still bound to the darkness, trapped within the house's cold, unyielding grip. "We have waited for you," the voice murmured, "for so long." And then I felt it, A pulse, a tug in the deepest part of me, like the house itself had reached into my soul and connected with me, binding me to it. The air around me thickened. I felt myself being pulled towards something, a force that grew stronger the more I resisted. My consciousness swirled in and out of focus as the darkness tried to drag me back into oblivion. But there was no escaping. Segment 7. The Presence. I woke with a start, gasping for air. The air was thick and cold, but it wasn't the suffocating cold I had felt earlier. This was different. The room I found myself in was vast, stretching far beyond the confines of the house. The shadows were deeper here, more concentrated, but they weren't just shadows, they were alive. The figure from before stood before me again, its glowing eyes now fixed on me with an intensity that made my heart skip. But it wasn't just the figure I had to contend with now. The walls around me seemed to pulse as if they were breathing in rhythm with my thoughts. Every inch of the space was alive with a terrible presence, a weight that crushed me with every breath I took. "You have joined us," the figure said, its voice now deeper, almost rumbling. "You are a part of this place, a part of the house. Welcome to your new home." The words twisted in my mind, pulling at my sanity. I was no longer just a visitor. I had become something else. I was bound to this place, tied to it in ways I couldn't understand. But I couldn't accept it, not yet. There had to be a way out. There had to be a way to escape this nightmare. "You can't leave," the figure whispered, its voice now an almost tangible presence in my mind. "This place will never let you go." I turned away, trying to block out the voice, the figure, the overwhelming sense of doom that filled the room. But the shadows followed me, stretching across the walls like a living thing. They curled around my legs, my arms, pulling me back. "Don't resist," it urged. "You are already one of us." I was trembling now, my thoughts racing. What was this place? What was I becoming? The fear, the uncertainty, the isolation, it was all consuming. Segment 8. The Transformation. The darkness grew thicker. I felt a shift inside me, as though something deep within me was changing. I was no longer just a prisoner of the house. The house was inside me, changing me, merging with me. I could feel its cold grip tightening around my soul. "You will not remember your former self. You are part of the house now. You have become like us." I tried to fight it. I tried to resist the pull, but it was futile. It was like fighting against a tide that was slowly, inexorably pulling me under. I looked down at my hands. They were trembling, but not from fear. No, it was something else. A dark energy coursed through me, a power I couldn't control. The house was seeping into me, reshaping me, turning me into something else, something that wasn't human anymore. I wanted to scream, but my voice was gone. The house had taken that too, along with everything else that made me who I was. The walls seemed to close in around me, the shadows darkening as the very air thickened with malice. The whispers were louder now, an endless cacophony that filled my mind. I couldn't escape them. I couldn't escape the house. Segment 9. The Eyes Watch. My body felt like it was being consumed by the darkness. Every inch of me was being overtaken, and I could feel the presence of the house all around me. The eyes, I had seen them before, those glowing yellow eyes that watched from every corner, from every shadow. They were everywhere now, watching me, waiting. "You will be a part of the Watchers now," the voice whispered. "You will see the house through the eyes of those who came before you. You will never escape, but you will always see." The figure that had been guiding me, pulling me deeper into the house, began to fade into the shadows, but I could still hear it, the voice, the whispers, the presence that filled every corner of the room. It wasn't just the figure anymore. It was the house itself, a force that stretched across time, across the very fabric of existence. It had been here for so long, and it had claimed so many before me. I was just another soul to be absorbed, another life to be swallowed by the darkness. But I couldn't help but wonder, had I really changed? Was this transformation real, or was it just another trick the house was playing on me? Segment 10, The Path Ahead. The darkness seemed to recede, pulling back like a curtain to reveal something far more terrifying. What lay beyond wasn't a room or a hallway or even a space within the house. It was time itself, fractured and warped, stretching out before me like an endless void. And then I saw it, a path, not a physical one, but something far more intangible. It stretched out before me, lined with flickering lights, eyes, all of them watching. Each one had been placed along this dark, twisting path, guiding me forward, compelling me to move. "You will follow the path," the voice echoed, now layered with thousands of others, each speaking in unison. "You have no choice." I stepped forward, my feet moving on their own, guided by an invisible force. The path twisted and turned, endless and consuming, drawing me into its depths. And I knew then there was no going back. There would never be a way out. Segment 11, The Final Binding. The air felt different now, no longer cold, no longer thick with the weight of despair, but warm, alive. I wasn't sure if I was dreaming or if this was some twisted reality, but the path before me was no longer dark and oppressive. Instead, it was alive with a strange, comforting light. I moved forward, but it wasn't me moving anymore. It was the house itself. It was taking me, shaping me, guiding me through this strange, unreal place. "You are now one with us," the voice whispered, soft and serene. "Welcome home." The house had claimed me completely, and as I stepped into the light, I knew that I was no longer who I had been. I had become part of the darkness, part of the eternal house that had waited for me all along. There was no escape. There was no freedom. I was home.
I didn't have a body anymore. There was no self to speak of, only the endless awareness that the house had gifted me. My thoughts were no longer my own. They were a part of the house, a part of its eternal being. I could see everything. I could see through the eyes of every soul who had come before me. They were all here now, in the walls, in the shadows, in the light, and they were all waiting for the next soul to join them. The next segments would explore the further horrors of the protagonist's transformation and the house's power. Would you like to proceed with additional segments or focus on any specific part? Continue with more segments with maximum words. Certainly, here's the continuation with more expanded segments. We'll delve deeper into the protagonist's transformation, their psychological torment, and the sinister influence of the house. Segment 13, The Eternal House. I no longer knew who I was. The notion of self had slipped through my fingers like sand, dissolving with every passing moment. The house had claimed me completely, and there was no distinction between where it ended and where I began. I was its now. Its thoughts flowed through me, its memories seeping into my consciousness, overwhelming my own. It was all-encompassing, the boundaries between the house and me erasing with every breath I took. The walls whispered secrets to me, their voices ancient and cryptic, filled with stories of those who had come before me. I could see their faces, or rather, the remnants of their faces, twisted in the fabric of the walls, their eyes wide with fear, their mouths frozen in silent screams. They were still here, lingering in the very foundation of the house, trapped forever in its suffocating grip. "You are not alone," the house whispered, its voice reverberating through every corner of my being. "We are all here with you now. Together, we are eternal."
The walls seemed to breathe, expanding and contracting with a life of their own. I could feel the pulse of the house beneath my feet, beneath my skin, in the deepest parts of my soul. It was alive, it was aware, it was a presence that had existed long before I arrived and would continue to exist long after I was gone. It had been waiting for me, just as it had waited for the others. But there was something more, something darker than the house itself. I could sense it in the shadows that lurked beyond my vision, in the places where even the walls seemed to fear. The house was built upon something ancient, something dark. It was not just a house, it was a vessel, a prison, and I had become a part of it, whether I wanted to or not. Segment 14, The Watchers. The first time I became aware of the Watchers, I thought I was losing my mind. I thought I was hearing things, seeing things that weren't real. But now I knew the truth. The Watchers had always been here. They were the ones who had seen everything, who had felt the house's pull long before I ever arrived. They were its eyes, its sentinels. They watched, always, never blinking, never moving, never breathing. The Watchers were everywhere. Their eyes flickered in the darkness, hidden in the recesses of the house. They stared from the cracks in the walls, from the twisted, gnarled roots that snaked through the floorboards. And they were always looking at me, watching me, waiting for me to become one of them. "You are one of us now," they whispered in unison, their voices 1,000 different tones layered over each other, creating a harmony that was as beautiful as it was horrifying. "You will watch forever." I could hear their voices inside my head, an endless chorus that filled every space in my thoughts. They spoke of the house's history, of the countless souls it had consumed, of the dark force that had birthed it. The house was more than just a structure. It was a conduit, a place of power, built upon the bones of those who had come before me. And now I was a part of it. The Watchers had seen everything, every soul that had been pulled into the house. They had witnessed their transformations, their slow descent into madness as the house twisted them into something other. They had watched as the house's power consumed them, reshaping them into the husks of what they once were. And now they were waiting for me to fall into the same pattern. We were you, and now you are us. I could feel it, the slow, creeping change. The house was inside me, twisting my very being, reshaping my thoughts, my memories, my essence. I could feel myself fading, disappearing, as the house took me into its dark embrace. I was becoming one of the Watchers, just another mind lost to the darkness. Segment 15, The Hall of Mirrors. I don't know how long I wandered through the house after that. Time had no meaning here. It was as though I was caught in a never-ending loop, moving from one room to the next, each one more distorted and alien than the last. And then I found it. The Hall of Mirrors. I don't know what drew me to it. Maybe it was the pull of the house. Maybe it was the whispering voices urging me forward. Whatever it was, I stepped into the hall and everything changed. The mirrors lined the walls in every direction, stretching far beyond what should have been possible. Each one was different. Some were cracked, others were warped, but they all reflected something that shouldn't have been there. Me, but not the me I remembered. The reflections in the mirrors were wrong. They twisted and contorted, their faces stretched into grotesque, monstrous shapes. Some had hollow eyes, others were covered in cracks, as if their very essence was being ripped apart. Each mirror held a version of me that was breaking, each reflection more distorted than the last. I stepped closer to one of the mirrors, my breath fogging up the surface. And then I saw it. The face in the reflection wasn't mine at all. It was someone else, a man I didn't recognize, with hollow eyes and a mouth stretched into a silent scream. His face was pressed up against the glass, as if he was begging for help. And then the voice returned. You have seen them all. You have seen those who have come before you. You will join them soon. You will be one with the mirrors. I stumbled back, my mind reeling. The reflections in the mirrors were souls. They were the remnants of those who had been consumed by the house, trapped within the glass, forever. And soon, I would be one of them. The whispers grew louder, more urgent, and I realized then that I wasn't just seeing the past, I was seeing the future. My reflection was waiting for me. It was a warning, a glimpse of what was to come. Segment 16, The Dark Heart. I couldn't escape. No matter where I turned, the house followed me. It pressed against me, suffocating me, tightening its grip on my soul. The deeper I went, the more I realized the house wasn't just a place. It was alive. It was a consciousness, a dark heart beating beneath the floorboards, pulsing with every step I took. I couldn't see it, but I could feel it. The heart of the house, the source of its power. It was buried deep within the foundation, hidden from sight, but it was there. I could feel it in my bones. It was calling to me. You are ready, the voice murmured, its tone dark and reverent. Come to the heart. It is your destiny. I followed the pull. I had no choice. The house was inside me, and it was guiding me, drawing me deeper into its depths. And the hallway stretched before me, endless, like a tunnel that led nowhere. The shadows twisted, mocking me, but I kept moving. I had to reach the heart. I had to understand what the house wanted from me. And then I found it. The door. It was at the end of the hallway, unlike anything I had seen before. It was made of dark wood, but it pulsed with a strange, dark energy. It called to me, its surface slick and smooth, as though it was made of some living substance. I reached out, my hand trembling, and when my fingers touched the door, it opened. Inside, I found the heart, a massive blackened mass that pulsed with a dark rhythmic beat. It was not human, not even close. It was something other, something ancient, something that had been alive long before this house had been built. And the walls around it were made of flesh, and the air smelled of decay. This was the heart of the house, and I was here, standing before it, a part of it. Welcome home, the voice whispered, and I knew then that there was no escape. There never had been. Segment 17, Forever Bound. I had become part of the house. There was no going back, no undoing what had been done. I was a part of its dark heart, bound to it in ways I couldn't fully understand. The house was inside me, and I was inside it. We were one now. The watchers, the whispers, the mirrors, they were all part of the house, and now I was part of them. You belong to us now, forever. There was no more resistance. There was no more fear.